So, you are a person of logic. Your reasoning is impeccable. You are well-read, well-researched, and well-informed. You don't think you're right. You know you are. You construct your worldview from facts, not feelings, right? Not so much. Howdy Homo sapiens, this is the first video in a series called Are You Sure About That?, which explores all the things that affect our beliefs and worldview and get in the way of honest reasoning. Today we're going to start at ground zero with your brain. We are living in a delusion, one that we create for ourselves. We walk through life believing that we are rational beings persuaded by evidence, making decisions with logic alone, that we're able to easily differentiate fact from propaganda, spot fake news, and construct our worldview from keen observation of reality itself. This is so far from the truth, it's embarrassing. Psychologists have spent decades studying human cognition and how we arrive at our beliefs, and their findings are increasingly depressing for humans as a species. This isn't because we're stupid. This is because we have lame, outdated Cro-Magnon brains. Brains that were never designed to operate and make decisions in the obscenely complex world that we find ourselves in. There are so many people, groups, events, histories, concepts, technologies that we have to keep track of on top of just the brain power it takes to get us through the day. It's kind of unfair. So our brains use a lot of shortcuts, and these shortcuts are called biases. Your brain is old, like really old. The human brain is 300,000 years old, and the latest update on it was 100,000 years ago. Human brains have been roughly the same ever since, and they are perfectly designed for hunters and gatherers. See, you have a shit ton of outdated firmware in your brain, and it's always running. Our minds evolved to very quickly analyze a situation, determine what's critical, and ignore what's not. Our brains want to simplify things for us. To do this, we use a system of categories and the recognition of patterns. Our brain loves them. Categories give us a shortcut for determining our course of action when we have experience with another member of that category, and patterns help us actually predict the future. And our brains categorize everything, including this video, under the category of "will subscribe when over." Humans in their natural habitat needed categories for everything in their world. But if their categories get too complex, there is more room for error and therefore death. Remember, hunter-gatherer survival drove the design of our brains. Simplification, that is, keeping our perception concise, kept us alive. Research in the field of psychology has established literally hundreds of biases that affect our thinking. I don't have time for them all, so I'm going to only go over a few of the most pervasive ones. I'm going to start with the big one, confirmation bias. Confirmation bias is like worm tongue, whispering in our ear with its pasty white skin and greasy hair, telling you exactly what you want to hear, but poisoning your reasoning all the while. Confirmation bias is your brain's tendency to put emphasis on evidence that supports your belief and to downplay evidence against your belief. We all know this as cherry picking. We know it when other people do it, at least. As I'm sure you know, this bias is much more active with subjects that challenge deeply held beliefs and subjects that are more emotionally charged for us. So we start with a biased search for information. If you've ever been in a debate with somebody and had your smartphone handy, you have probably ended up doing quick searches for evidence. And of course, you are looking for only the evidence that supports your position. I've been guilty of this, and I think most of us have. And unfortunately, there's no shortage of evidence on the internet. If you want evidence to support your belief, whatever your belief, you will find it on the web and with minimal effort. Then there's biased interpretation of evidence. Not all evidence is equal, and because we know this, we tend to question the authenticity of evidence that is contrary to our belief, whereas we give a pass to evidence that supports it. Finally, there is biased recall. Your brain will actually more quickly recall evidence that supports your belief than evidence that doesn't. It's like storing stuff in your cluttered garage. The evidence against your belief gets stored in the back where it's hard to get to. The supporting evidence gets placed right up front where you can grab it quickly if needed. Even if you are trying not to have this bias, your brain is doing it anyway. Another bias that has a major impact on our beliefs is called the availability heuristic. This bias has to do with the link between how quickly an event comes to mind and how frequently we perceive that event to occur. One common way this affects us is in the case of media coverage of outrageous or violent events. Because these things burn into our brain fully charged with emotion like horror or anger, they're recalled very quickly when we're constructing our worldview. Keep in mind, the news, by its very nature, covers the exceptional. You'll never see or read a news story about a plane landing successfully, a child arriving home from school safely, a person saying something inoffensive, or a benign crowd of people. Why? Because it's boring. Media companies want your clicks, and outrage is the hot commodity in the 21st century. The next time you see or read something in the news that outrages you or messes you up, take a step back and look into the data on the frequency of such an event. Then calibrate your worldview to that, not to headlines. This leads into the next bias, negativity bias. Negative experiences make a much larger impact on our psychological state and beliefs than neutral or positive ones. One way this affects our beliefs about others is that we more often attribute intention when the outcome is negative than when the outcome is positive. Meaning we tend to believe bad things happen on purpose, whereas good or neutral things don't necessarily. We're always looking for a bad guy. This is one of the core biases in conspiracy theories, the belief that bad things don't just happen randomly, it's always due to someone's intentions. Okay, this one is just weird. There's an inverse relationship with expertise on a subject and the confidence level one has in their beliefs about it. Meaning, people who are very knowledgeable about a subject sometimes tend to be very careful about making proclamations as they know how complex the subject is and how many unknowns there are. In contrast, someone who just learns the bare minimum of a subject tends to look at it as very simplistic and becomes very certain in their proclamations about it. Yeah, I've done that. This one we're all familiar with. Stereotyping is our brain's tendency to categorize, turn towards people. Sometimes stereotypes are ingrained from our culture, and sometimes they happen from our personal experience. Sometimes they're positive, sometimes they're negative. As we all know, stereotypes create one of those tricky tightropes to walk in a mixed society. And we have to be honest. The fact is, many stereotypes don't just fall out of the sky. They happen because a large number of individuals in a group share things in common, like ways of talking, foods they like, music, and shared life experience. And people observe this and file it away. But over time, these commonalities can begin to outline a caricature. And when there's hostility towards that group, that caricature can become grotesque and destructive. Given our brain's love of categories, this one is tough. One thing to note, we're used to decrying common stereotypes like race, religion, gender, and sexual preference. But today, in addition, we need to be wary of stereotypes about people who believe differently than us, political or ideological stereotypes. The fact is, people are complex, and in any given group of people, especially large groups, you'll find wide variation of the belief system from the most tepid to the most fanatical. People are individuals even when they appear to be the same from the outside. Don't give in to this bias. There are so many biases that affect us. Others include framing effect, loss aversion, outcome bias, pessimism bias, endowment effect, proportionality bias, triviality, present bias, duration backfire, the spotlight bias, system self-serving bias, continuous bias, fundamental bias. The first step in seeing the world clearly is recognizing how many of your own psychological forces are working against that. These forces kept us alive in the distant past. They are a big problem today for all of us. One last point. According to research, intelligence level seems to have no effect on the level of bias a person has. In fact, more intelligent people are better at defending biased beliefs because they have more mental faculty to draw upon. So take that, smartass. So how can we possibly combat these forces undermining a clear perception of reality? Well, here are some things you can do to fight the influence of your biases. First, slow down. You don't have to have a strong opinion about something. In fact, you don't have to have an opinion at all. An agnostic position on a topic is often the only rational position to take when the evidence is murky, contradictory, or just lacking. So be comfortable with taking a neutral position on things until you can learn more. Put a pin in it. Unfortunately, doubt is stigmatized as a sign of mental weakness and insecurity. It's anything but. It's honesty and humility. Sometimes doubt might cause a sense of guilt because we may feel like we're somehow betraying an activist group we're part of, that we no longer are dedicated to the cause. But peer pressure is the worst reason to maintain a belief. Never be scared to question the belief your group holds. Next, listen to your heart. That is, try to be aware of your feelings when you're thinking or discussing a belief. If you find yourself getting irritated or angry, that's a good indication that you have some emotional investment in the belief and are attached to your position. If something is true, it doesn't require emotional attachment and defense. The evidence speaks for itself. You might want to take a step back, put on a critical thinking hat, and reevaluate. Doesn't mean you're wrong necessarily. It just means your reasoning has been compromised. Finally, ask yourself, are you thinking like a scientist or like a lawyer? Science is about finding what is true regardless of what we want to be true. Lawyers are concerned with convincing others regardless of the truth itself. Be like a scientist. If you've ever watched a scientific lecture or an interview with a scientist, even though they know a lot about their subject, they're always very careful about making proclamations. They're constantly offering caveats. We're not sure about that yet, or we need more information. This is what intellectual honesty looks like, and it's an example for all of us. So ration out that certainty. We're all better off for it. And when you're talking to someone of an opposite opinion, if you model a more open-minded attitude, making doubt kind of cool, they're more likely to follow. And who knows, maybe you've just opened somebody else's mind. The magic words are, I'm not sure. I know I learned a lot putting this together, and I hope you did too. But what do you think of all this? Do you think that we can rise above our biases? Is there a bias that you're familiar with that I left out? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks so much for watching, and until next time, stay doubtful. Hey everyone, thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please drop a like, and if you want to see more, hit subscribe. There's a lot more topics we can explore.